Friends, we are at Genesis 29, and this is Jacob arrives at Padanaram. Or Jacob meets Rachel. So here we go. Just remembering that Isaac sent, Jacob said, hey, go to your grandfather Bethuel's, the house of your grandfather Bethuel, marry one of your uncle Laban's daughters. So here we are at 29. Jacob hurried on, finally arriving in the land of the east. He saw in the distance 3 flocks of sheep lying in an open field beside a well, waiting to be watered. But a heavy stone covered the mouth of the well. Interesting. All right. It was the custom there to wait for all the flocks to arrive before removing the stone. After watering them, the stone would be rolled back over the mouth of the well. Jacob went over to the shepherds and asked them, "Where do you live?" "At Haran," they said. And verse 5, "Do you know a man there named Laban, the grandson of Nahor?" "Yes, we do," they replied. So you see him getting there. I think it's very interesting that this starts off with that little scene where he sees this open field and a well and these 3 flocks of sheep. This heavy stone is blocking this. The flocks, they wait as a custom for all of the flocks to arrive before that stone is rolled away, or they remove that stone. After watering them, the stone would be rolled back over the mouth of the well. So to where to get this water. That's just an interesting visual for a second, but then you see he goes over to those shepherds and then asks them, because he's on a mission to find, obviously, Uncle Laban. And they say, "Yes, we do." So at verse 6, "How is he?" Jacob asked. "He's well and prosperous." So he's doing great. "Look, here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep." 7, "Why don't you water the flocks so they can get back to grazing?" Jacob asked. "They'll be hungry if you stop so early in the day." So immediately he gets to this land, strikes up a conversation, and then he's like, "Hey, why you guys do it this way?" So this is going to earn some fans. Let's see. "We don't roll away the stone and begin the watering until all the flocks and shepherds are here," they replied. As this conversation was going on, Rachel arrived with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherd. So you see this female shepherd here. That's interesting. It's more interesting to me because shepherds are usually thought of as like lower, on the social scale. And I think it's interesting that they say he's well and prosperous, and yet his daughter Rachel is a shepherd. That's interesting. So maybe he's well and prosperous as far as this class is concerned. I don't know, but that makes me wonder some things. And because she was his cousin, the daughter of his mother's brother, and because the sheep were his uncle's, Jacob went over to the well and rolled away the stone and watered his uncle's flock. So he breaks tradition here and the practice that they just explained. Then Jacob kissed Rachel, and tears came to his eyes. This is a very forward thing for Jacob to be doing. He explained that he was her cousin on her father's side, her Aunt Rebekah's son. So Rachel quickly ran and told her father Laban. Verse 13, "As soon as Laban heard about Jacob's arrival, he rushed out to meet him and greeted him warmly." So you got a good reception so far. Laban then brought him home, and Jacob told him his story. "Just think, my very own flesh and blood," Laban exclaimed. The next section is called Jacob Marries Leah and Rachel. I want to note the things that are standing out to me here so far. 1, why is Rachel, the daughter of this man who is doing well and prosperous, a shepherd? 2, what was the effect that had on things? He questioned that tradition or that custom of the well and that being covered until all the shepherds arrived. And then he just, says, this is my uncle's flock, and that's Rachel, and he kisses her to greet it. And now it doesn't say anything about, this was a deep, passionate kiss. It wasn't anything like that. It's just, hey, he kissed her and then began to weep aloud. So that's interesting. Doesn't really say much about how she felt or how she reacted to that. other than she quickly ran to go and tell her uncle, or her father, sorry, Laban. And then, you know, that Laban is excited about this, it seems. So now we get to the second part of verse 14 here. After Jacob had been there about a month, so some time passes, Laban said to him, "You shouldn't work for me without pay just because we are relatives. How much do you want?" So that tells us that he's been there a month, but he's not just lounging around. He's been working there. Okay, he's settled in and he's working there. I wonder if he's ruffling feathers by breaking some of these other traditions or cultural expectations, but let's keep going. Verse 16, because he says, "How much do you want?" Now Laban had 2 daughters, Leah, who was the oldest, and her younger sister Rachel. Leah had pretty eyes, but Rachel was beautiful in every way, with a lovely face and a shapely figure. That's awesome. Leah's got a really nice personality. She's really... This is so funny. She's got very pretty eyes. But Rachel was the one. Ooh, that's the catch. 18. Since Jacob was in love with Rachel, he told her father, "I'll work for you 7 years if you'll give me Rachel, your younger daughter, as my wife." So that's what he says is his price is going to be for working. Which seems very offensive to us. But that's, again, that's how culture kind of worked. Marriages were arranged sometimes, and then, you know, yeah, it's like, hey, I'll give you my daughter for 12 goats. I mean, like, it's just things worked a little different. And that's really weird. But this is where he's saying, it says he loved her, so I want to keep that in mind as the basis before we let that kind of taint any of our thoughts here. It did say he loved her. I'll work for you 7 years. Since Jacob was in love with Rachel, he told her father, "I'll work for you 7 years if you'll give me Rachel, your younger daughter, as my wife." "Agreed," verse 19, Laban replied. "I'd rather give her to you than someone outside of the family." 20. So Jacob spent the next 7 years working to pay for Rachel. But his love for her was so strong that it seemed to him but a few days. Very sweet. Very awesome. That speaks a lot to love and perseverance, but anyway. 21. Finally, the time came for him to marry her. "I have fulfilled my contract," Jacob said to Laban. "Now give me my wife so we can be married." So 7 years have passed here. He's been working hard to earn this. It doesn't seem like 7 years to him, just a few days, because he's had his eyes on the prize. He's had his perspective fixed on that goal of this marriage. And, yeah, give me my wife so we can be married. Verse 22. So Laban invited everyone in the neighborhood to celebrate with Jacob at a wedding feast. So everybody's celebrating. That night when it was dark, Laban took Leah to Jacob, and he slept with her. And Laban gave Leah a servant, Zilpah, to be her maid. But when Jacob woke up in the morning, it was Leah. What? Sitcom television show shocker, the rollover and the good morning, to be continued. That just happened here. Like, so when it was dark, Laban took Leah to Jacob, and he slept with her. So I guess not even candlelight of that. It's just dark, and you know, that happened. So he's very shocked, obviously, when he wakes up. When Jacob woke up in the morning, it was Leah. "What sort of trick is this?" Jacob raged at Laban. "I worked 7 years for Rachel. What do you mean by this trickery?" So notice, like, Jacob's coming down on somebody for this trickery. 26. "It's not our custom to marry off a younger daughter ahead of the firstborn," Laban replied. Oh, there's a loophole, a customary traditional loophole. You didn't know that? But tradition seems so important to you so far. Keep going. "Wait until the bridal week is over, and you can have Rachel too. That is, if you promise to work another 7 years for me." Wait until the bridal week is over. Okay, you got this wife, and she's got a servant, a maid now. So it's cool. Just wait a week, man. Just wait this week. So 28. So Jacob agreed to work 7 more years. A week after Jacob had married Leah, Laban gave him Rachel too. And Laban gave Rachel a servant, Bilhah, to be her maid. So Leah's got Zilpah, Rachel has Bilhah to be her maid. So Jacob slept with Rachel too, and he loved her more than Leah. Oh, pretty eyes, Leah. He then stayed and worked the additional 7 years. So that's a quick way that 14 years have suddenly passed. 14 years and a month, technically, in what we've read today. But then it gets to this last part of this, and it's Jacob's many children, starting at verse 31. Because Leah was unloved, the Lord let her have a child, while Rachel was childless. That's really, really interesting, and I want to look at different translations here before making any sort of statement on what stands out here. When the Lord saw that Leah was hated, in the King James Version, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. In New International Version it says, when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. The difference there being, hey, he is opening her womb, Lord is taking this notice of this, so the Lord sees, and then he acts. But, you know, the difference there being very strong words of, like, you can be not loved, like, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're hated. In the King James Version it says was hated. In New International, was not loved. In New Living it says, since he saw that she was unloved. New American Standard Bible says, now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, with a footnote. It also says, possibly hated, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was barren. So, what stands out to me here is, you know, that the Lord sees, okay, and that's an important thing for us to notice, and that because he saw that, he reacted in a certain way, and he opened this womb. Now, to me, this speaks very interestingly. We'll see how it plays out. But when I think about the love that you get to experience as a parent, but specifically a mother's love for their child, like, that's a way to experience this love. I've seen children come out of very horrible things, you know, but the mother's love that they experience and the life that gets experienced completely changes any of that other stuff. It all becomes like, well, who cares? Look at this beautiful gift and this new relationship, this new love and this new life. So I think that that's really interesting that the Lord saw, and then he, like, okay, you're unloved, well, I'm going to give you love, to me. And again, that's just speculation, that's just me reading into things, but I think that that's really interesting that for sure you see the Lord seeing, and then him opening up a womb, letting her have a child. Okay, but you have Rachel, who is childless, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that, so let's continue going. So Leah became pregnant and had a son, because her womb had been opened. She named him Reuben, which there is an asterisk. Reuben means, look, a son. It also sounds like the Hebrew for, he has seen my misery. Interesting, okay, because she's got to be this miserable wife. Oh, I've only got pretty eyes, and he loves her so much more than me. I cannot imagine that dynamic. Oh, my goodness. So Leah became pregnant, had a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, the Lord has noticed my misery, and now my husband will love me. What's interesting is that gives her this false sense of being loved more. It gave her a false sense of having suddenly more worth and more value and suddenly being more lovable, instead of just like, I can experience love with this child. She soon became pregnant again and had another son. She named him Simeon. And it says, Simeon probably means one who hears. For she said, the Lord heard that I was unloved and has given me another son. And this reveals a couple of things, that you know, God sees her and he hears her. In my mind, I'm like, well, then that means that, you know, he's seeing and he's hearing, again, another pattern that we have seen of the Lord. And again, that we see with the Lord specifically, and a woman who is kind of in a place of misery or hopelessness, in a sense. So that's very, very interesting. And children are involved. So, stuff to kind of notice, but this is very interesting that you also, what this tells us is that, regardless, there's still this, of how much he loves her or not, there's still this physical interaction that's going on between them. This isn't immaculate conception that's going on here. She soon became pregnant again, had another son. So at this point she's had two sons. One that means he saw my misery, or noticed my misery, or one he saw. And then two, he heard. Lord heard that I was unloved and has given me another son. And both times she's thinking, this is going to make me more loved. Again, she became pregnant at verse 34 and had a son. She named him Levi. Levi sounds like a Hebrew term that means being attached or feeling affection for. Levi, being attached or feeling affection for. For she said, surely now my husband will feel affection for me, since I have given him 3 sons. So again, she's looking at this with a big, big idea of it earning her more worth and more love in the eyes of her husband, who loves Rachel so much more. Rachel, who is barren. But man, that's just crazy. She's thinking that this is going to do that. She's keeping her eyes on that. And we see, it doesn't tell us exactly how much time has passed, but I mean, you have to guess that that's at least almost 3 years. Let's keep going. Once again, she became pregnant and had a son. She named him Judah, for she said, now I will praise the Lord. And then she stopped having children. Judah sounds like the Hebrew term for praise. So again, we've seen a pattern of the Lord seeing, the Lord hearing, and specifically a woman, and one who is in misery, one who is not feeling loved, one who doesn't necessarily see hope in things, longing for. And God answers this by opening up her womb. He does this 3, now 4 times, but each time it's like, okay, he's going to love me. My husband's going to love me more. My husband's going to love me more. Which we'll see how that plays out. But I think it's very interesting to note that there's still this big emphasis in the names of having a deeper meaning, and specifically one that ties to the Lord. I think that's really important. But I think it's very interesting that it says, now I will praise the Lord. Let me look at the other one. This time I will praise the Lord. This time I will praise the Lord. She conceived again, bore a son. She said, now I will praise the Lord. Therefore she called his name Judah, and left bearing. She stopped having children. I don't want to read into that and say, well, then she didn't praise the other times. But I do want to note that what is recorded here for us to see is that she says, now I will praise the Lord. These other times her focus was on her husband, on what will this bring me? This is good, but this is going to make me loved. This is going to make me loved. But there's this praise here of, I'm going to praise the Lord. It's almost like, this is definitely reading into it, but it's almost like you recognize the gift that is this, and the love that he's letting you experience, and the blessing that you already have. I'm going to praise the Lord. He's given me 4 sons. Like, at this point, it's almost like she's wizened up to the fact that this doesn't earn her any more love. These children are not, pawns and, currency for more love. This is, I don't know, it's a blessing. And that's just so interesting that she says, now I will praise the Lord, and then she stops having children. It's kind of like, I don't know. I get this picture of God sometimes blessing us with something, but we're still like left wanting, and we don't really have that thankful heart, or like He gives us these opportunities and we don't really seize it, and He's trying to teach us through that. And I think for myself, my own experience, very often I'm like, yeah, okay, great, but but Lord, I really, and He's like, I'm going to give you another shot. I'm going to give you another shot. I'm going to give you another shot, or I'm going to let you keep dealing with this until, or you're going to be caught in this cycle and this poor logic, or this misstep in faith, until you get it, until you get that grateful heart and that gratitude, or your eyes are open to what you can already do, not what you can't or what you don't have. Sorry, not that that's exactly what's happened here, but I think that it's very interesting that that's how that kind of played out. So Jacob is now married. 14 years has passed. 14 years and a month have technically passed. He's got Laban's 2 daughters now. Worked to earn both of them, but only really wanted to earn one of them. Laban kind of tricked him because of a traditional loophole or a cultural loophole, which you see that, to me, like, obviously he didn't know that, you know, because he didn't specify or worry about that, just like he didn't know at the beginning, you know, the well practice was this. So I think that's very interesting, but also that it happened to Jacob the deceiver, the trickster, or whatever, and that's how he got his wife. I think that's very interesting. But then, again, he's in love with Leah, but he's married he's in love with Rachel, but he's married to Leah as well. And since she was unloved, Lord heard her, saw her, answers this, and then gives her these children. So very interesting stuff that's coming on. I'm really interested to see how this kind of plays out in the next chapter, and I hope you are too. But boy, that's kind of a long chapter. We'll see. I hope to see you there, and yeah, hope this is a blessing to you. What stood out to you?